Hi, how you going? Lords of the Fallen is finally out, and let's be honest, the launch wasn't the smoothest one. Performance issues and crashes on both simpler rigs and NASA computers, consoles, kinda sketchy multiplayer co-op, and a good amount of really questionable and weird design choices. But despite all that, I had a blast. Despite its shortcomings, it's still a good, solid Souls-like with a touch of originality and good looking too. In this video, I will go through every aspect of the game: visuals, sound design, combat, level design, multiplayer, and of course performance. Pretty much everything you need to know before buying it. And if you have a question that is not covered in the video, do not hesitate to ask away. There's a good chance it will be answered by me or by smart people. Let's see if Lords of the Fallen is worth buying now, shall we? Lords of the Fallen is a brand new Souls-like action RPG developed by a brand new company called Hexworks. The development cycle was quite a bumpy ride too, with Hexworks taking over after CI Games made a decision to stop working with Deck 13, the developers of the original game. And I think it was a good decision. New Lords of the Fallen is nothing like its predecessor, and when I say nothing, I mean it's better tenfold in every aspect. Unfortunately, it doesn't reflect on Steam reviews, with the game sitting at mixed with 57% of positive reviews at the moment, while the original is being 58%, but it's slowly but surely crawling up, and I'm pretty sure the new Lords will eventually beat the old Lords, especially given that they're releasing a new patch every day. Lords of the Fallen gameplay is a mix of Dark Souls and, I don't know, Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver. You explore interconnected areas, fight enemies, loot stuff, etc., which sounds like a pretty standard deal for Souls-like games enjoyers. Lords of the Fallen though adds a few new and quite unique mechanics to spice things up a bit. For instance, your character comes with an umbral lamp, a device that lets you either peek into the world of the dead, called Umbral, to harass its inhabitants, or to completely warp to Umbral to, for example, solve environmental puzzles or explore areas otherwise unreachable in Axiom, the world of the living. And I think the lamp part is really well done and fun to use. Of course, along the way you meet various dubious NPCs like the traveling merchant or this guy that looks like Bloody Baron from The Witcher 3.
You wouldn't know a good tale from a runny fart.
Each and every one of them having their own quests and different agendas. Early in the game you unlock the hub area that is called Skyrest Bridge, where most of the NPCs are congregated. Right, we have a lot to discuss, but before we dive deeper, I review every Souls-like action RPG you can get on PC and then some. So if you are interested in this type of content, subscribe to my channel. It will also help me heaps with the discoverability. Your support is highly appreciated, and if you want to go further, there's now an option to become a member of the channel by clicking the join button. Thank you very much. One of the most important things in Soulsborne games is combat, in my opinion, if not the most important. If combat sucks, the rest doesn't really matter, right? Well, some of you know how skeptical I was about Lords of the Fallen in general and its combat specifically. Well, I guess it's not wrong to be skeptical about something, but I'm sure as hell glad to be proven wrong. The combat here is amazing. I'd say it's a mix of Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne in terms of pacing. The controls are very responsive, hitboxes are visually accurate, and it always feels like you are in full control of your character. It might not look like it when you're watching the video, but when you are experiencing it hands-on, it's a whole different animal. Combat in Lords of the Fallen is engaging and quite addictive too. There's a wither mechanic that is similar to Bloodborne's Rally. After blocking or performing certain actions with your lamp, a portion of your health becomes grayed out, and you lose it completely if you get hit. Also, you have the most important tools at your disposal: blocking, parrying, and dodging, and it's fantastic that they're equally viable. The game doesn't force you to use one over the other, so if, for example, parrying is not your thing, you can just rely on dodges and succeed. Although the parry window is quite generous in the game, and it doesn't take a lot of time to figure out the timings, Lords of the Fallen combat is not parry focused. It really is whatever you feel like using focused. When it comes to equipment, you have your swords, axes, hammers, great swords, spears, flails, staves, etc. And almost every weapon can be two-handed or mixed with a shield or another weapon for dual wield. Depending on your quote-unquote stance, there are different attack animations, so it's worth playing around with different weapons and combinations to find your perfect style. I personally immensely enjoyed two-handing a log splitter. On top of that, there are various ranged weapons, and I really like how it's done here. You have bows, crossbows, and catalysts that, when equipped, give you 3 slots for different types of ammunition or for catalyst spells, and your bow crossbow ammo automatically refills on rest. There's this bar with notches that indicates how much ammo you have left, and to restock, you need to either rest at a bonfire or use a certain consumable. Oh, and they're also throwables, but you kinda have to unequip your bow to use them. There's a good variety too. You have throwing knives, hatchets, various grenades, etc. And each of them deals base damage and applies various status effects. Also, every ranged weapon sorta eats up a different amount of notches from your ammo bar, and I think that adds an extra strategic layer to ranged combat. And yeah, I think some players might find the unlimited ammo immersion breaking, but I don't know, I really like the way it's done in the game. When it comes to enemies, you have your standard deal of knights, demons, and lunatic humans, which is kinda upsetting to be honest. I was hoping for a better enemy variety, but as I progressed I kept getting pretty much the same enemies over and over again, but with a larger health pool. In Umbral, on top of regular enemies, you have to deal with Umbral entities, faceless creepos, ranged faceless creepos, butterflies that I personally hate deeply, big head dudes, and a few more. Enemy density though is a whole different story. There's just too many sometimes, man. It's like Dark Souls 2 Iron Keep over again. Clusterfucks of mobs with a few strategically placed snipers to make sure you pull every single hair out of your arse. And it's quite a problem. Most of the levels in the game are packed with secrets, you know, little puzzles, hidden loot, etc. And it's such a shame that you sometimes don't have enough time to just chill and explore. And yeah, sure, you can pick a group of mobs apart, but trust me, eventually you'll make a mistake and get ganked or taken down by a ranged mob from across the map. Like I said, it's the Iron Keep all over again sometimes. I really don't know why the devs have such a strong fixation on ranged enemies, and man, they hit hard. Bosses though are pretty tight. I liked almost every single one of them. A few were, in my opinion, not as good, like the Hushed Saint for example. That whole boss fight was just Kyobo the Demon, but without any thrills and fun, at least the first half of it. It wasn't difficult or anything, just tedious and way too long to my taste. What Lords of the Fallen nails though is level design. There's a huge variety of different locations. Dilapidated villages, forests, snowy forests, mountain passes, castle ramparts, a poisoned swamp, like who would have thought, and then some. And on top of looking amazing visually, all the locations are fun to explore. Like the world is really vast, and you often have more than one direction to go, which is great. Again, exploring the world would have been much more fun if there were at least a little bit less enemies, like everywhere, especially in Umbral. And speaking of Umbral, Lords of the Fallen features a dual world mechanic. You have Axiom, the world of the living, and Umbral, the world of the dead. And you can warp between said worlds pretty much every time you want using your Umbral lamp. And it's not just a gimmick too, it's a mechanic that you absolutely have to use in order to progress. For example, there's no water in Umbral, so when you see a body of water in Axiom, it almost every time means there's a whole chunk of map to explore if you traverse the Umbral. And it feels handcrafted most of the time too. What Lords of the Fallen also nailed in my opinion is the interconnectivity. I wouldn't say it's on Dark Souls 1 level, but it's still great. And you know, when I heard Sol and Cesar of Hexworks saying in one of the interviews that they took inspiration from Dark Souls in terms of interconnectivity, I was ready to settle for less than I got. There's no better feeling than, oh, you know, I think I know this place. Shit. Another thing I want to mention, and you might think that I'm weird, you know how every single Souls-like game has these platforming sequences that make you want to turn that shit off and go touch grass or something? Well, Lords of the Fallen has them aplenty, but they never got me mad. Quite on the contrary, I found platforming satisfying. Even though to jump you have to sprint and then press a corresponding button, just like pretty much in every Souls game, I enjoyed jumping from platform to platform quite a bit, occasionally drop-kicking shitheads into oblivion. There are a few starting classes to choose from, but it doesn't really matter too much, I guess, because once you're in a hub area, you can buy pretty much all the gear starting classes begin with, except for the Dark Crusader, of course. To unlock Dark Crusader, you have to finish a certain quest. Of course I picked Condemned. They start with a shit bucket for a weapon, and after 2 to 3 hours I looked like I just ran away from Central Yarnum, you know? Weapon art is a sick dropkick, by the way, that I just couldn't stop using. Seriously though, dropkicks are the most fun and hilarious thing about starting as a Condemned. Every man should experience it at least once. Visually, the game looks stunning. What you've seen in the trailers and gameplay showcases is there, like all of it. I mean, you're looking at it right now. Visually, Lords of the Fallen indeed is a next-gen Souls-like. I oftentimes found myself just stopping and admiring the view, and a built-in photo mode is a very nice addition. I always find it hard to talk about visuals because it's always subjective, but you just can't deny that the game looks gorgeous. I mean, look at it. Sound design is another thing I was skeptical about. Some impact sounds were underwhelming and some were just downright terrible in gameplay trailers. It looks like most of it is fixed. I hope there was a better parry sound effect though. The one that is in the game at the moment sounds like fairy dust wet farts or something and doesn't give you the satisfaction it, in my opinion, needs to give. Some ambient sounds are downright terrifying and made me think for a second that I'm playing a horror game or something. Or these umbral ambient sounds. It's something you don't really pay attention to until you teleport back to Axiom. That's when all the outworldly droning sounds mixed with shrieks of umbral creatures suddenly stop and you're like, whew, it's so good to be alive. Music, on the other hand, is just okay. I mean, most of it sounds like your classic fantasy stuff that will fit into any fantasy-related piece, but for me it's not the end of the world. Of course it would have been nice to have some epic Dark Souls-style tunes, like the Nameless King theme, for example, that I just can't get out of my head. But well, nothing like that is here. It's like if I was tortured by you and the only way to stop it was to hum Lords of the Fallen main theme, you'd keep torturing. And I'm not trying to pick on the artists responsible for the soundtrack, it's great. All I'm saying is that there are way better examples. So, multiplayer is where things get a little bit ugly. The game's main selling point was a seamless co-op feature that got people so excited, myself included, and I even made a video about Lords of the Fallen multiplayer a couple of days before the release, and yeah, I kinda feel like a dingus now. The only seamless thing about seamless co-op and Lords of the Fallen is that your session doesn't get terminated if either you or your mate dies. The rest is just a bit underwhelming is all. The guest gets less XP, way less loot from the enemies, and for example, can't upgrade their Sanguinarix, a local Estus flask, in the hub area. So to upgrade your healing item, you need to leave the session, go to your hub, upgrade it, and then come back. Not so seamless after all, eh? Accompanying randoms is quite a slugfest too. Somewhere around 50% of times I'd rubber band hard, even after all the updates, and that just makes the overall multiplayer experience very frustrating. And you know, the fact that some players don't bother looking for bonfires that are closer to the boss arena and watch the intro cutscenes every attempt we make on a boss doesn't help. We also couldn't make crossplay work, like at all. I was on PC and Andres was on Xbox and we just couldn't connect to each other. Maybe we were doing something wrong, I don't know. It was on day one. Maybe something's changed now, you let us know in the comments. Hi Andres, by the way, I'm proud of you, son. I kinda wish multiplayer was in a better shape because for helping players, for example, you get currency that you can later use to purchase unique armor sets that look sick. Same with PvP, for killing other players you get severed hands that can also be exchanged for goodies, but it's really hard to farm them now. PvP is something I wasn't really looking forward to, mostly because I'm incredibly bad at it, but I'm that type of player who wants to embrace everything the game has to offer, so I don't have any problem with PvP being always on. Yeah, in Lords of the Fallen you can get invaded anytime, and it doesn't matter if you're playing solo or in co-op. The only way to turn invasions off is to either buy an item that for a time removes you from the invasion queue or to play offline. Well, I did none of that, and you know how many times I got invaded? 0 times. And I don't know if it has anything to do with multiplayer being wonky or everyone became wholesome for some reason. I tried invading people just to see how it works, but it was lagging and rubber banding so hard I ditched the idea completely. I will definitely revisit and try again, but so far PvP is almost unplayable for me. I don't know if it will work better for you, I can't really vouch for that. Performance is the main reason why the game has mixed reviews on Steam, I think. I was on the luckier side of things and the game runs fine most of the time for me. As in, it never gets below 60 FPS and I have everything on ultra except for reflection and global illumination. These are on medium because on high and ultra the game starts using RTX and that tanks the performance really hard. I'd like to add that the game is out for, what, 6 days and we have 7 patches released. Probably will be more by the time this video hits YouTube and it looks like the devs are really determined to fix their shit. For example, my first time fighting Pietà on day 1 was a disaster because I had to fight her at 20 FPS. These issues are now resolved, for me at least. The other thing a lot of players seem to be experiencing is crashes, but I haven't had a single crash during my 40 or so hours playtime, and I don't have the best rig out there. My specs are in the description if you're curious. Now, here are some things I didn't like about Lords of the Fallen, and no, I'm not talking about that one cutscene that looks like clay stop motion from the Neverhood. This blood looks weird. I'm talking about some weird design choices and quality of life features or lack thereof. Sometimes it feels like the game just doesn't want to respect your time, like the elevators you can't send back up to shorten a boss run. Seriously, elevators in Lords of the Fallen are designed to lock you in when you ascend or descend. There was at least one boss run where I had to ride 2 elevators and every single time I had to pull a bloody lever and wait. You might think that maybe a lever sends it back up, but no, it doesn't work. Oh, and there was a ladder on the way too, where you couldn't just drop down without taking damage. And I'm not even talking cool little elevators, I'm talking Bleak Fate Forsaken style behemoths. I also hate when your quick access belt gets auto-filled with shit you pick up. Like, I want to have my sanguinarics there, ammo refill and salts, but the game decides that I apparently need a soul item there too, you know, just in case I'd want to absorb it in the middle of the fight. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but can be extremely annoying when while fighting a boss you have to circle around items you don't really need there, you know? Again, enemy density is quite atrocious and sometimes it feels like you're playing Dead Rising or something. Enemy placement is not always good either, although I appreciate some, gotcha moments to some extent, as it teaches you to tread carefully and study the map. Lords of the Fallen has a little bit too much of that. You know, an enemy hiding behind every single barricade just stops being fun after a while. Also, there are these remembrances you can soulflay using your lamp to learn some lore. You can only do that when you're in Umbral, which makes it a little bit more tedious to extract them. Another little thing is cutscenes before boss fights. Am I the only person here who finds it weird that the game plays them every time you do a boss fight? I mean, they're skippable, but just why? I don't even mind if they're unskippable for the first time, but why would I want to watch it again? And again, and again. The new game plus introduced is another weird design choice in my opinion. Now, I know that some players might see it as a good challenge, but I don't. There are no vestiges in New Game Plus except for one in the hub area. Of course, you can craft temporary ones using vestige seedlings, unique items you get for defeating bosses, but even with that, it's just the wrong type of challenging. In my opinion, this should be optional. Like, there are people who just want to get 2 other endings, get the remaining armor sets, achievements, etc. But that's just me. What's your take? Bottom line is, some things take way more time than they should and add a splash of frustration to otherwise great and engaging experience. I've seen people saying that Lords of the Fallen will be the Elden Ring killer, but in my opinion, we haven't even seen Dark Souls 1 killer made by someone that is not from software. But Lords of the Fallen is a step in the right direction and a fantastic experience overall. It's great as a single player game, it's not so great at the moment as a multiplayer game, but in time I'm pretty sure all the bumps will be ironed out and we'll get not the Elden Ring killer but a decent competitor against From Software's monopoly. By the way, check out Joel Haver's video about Lords of the Fallen from the NPC's perspective. He's great and extremely talented. Thanks for watching, see ya.